I promise if you just do this for like 10, 15 minutes one day, your knife skills will improve dramatically. Do you want to make quick and healthy meals, but you find chopping vegetables slowing you down? Whether you just want to get more comfortable in your kitchen with a knife, or you want to be able to cut wicked fast like this, today I'm going to walk you through some basic knife skills to get you cutting vegetables like a pro. Or at least like a fool like me. One of those two things. Greetings and welcome to or welcome back to PB with Jay. Here on the channel, we focus on all things plant-based goodness, and this is something I didn't think I would do on the channel because I didn't think a lot of people would be interested in it, but I've mentioned it on live streams and other things, and there's an overwhelming response for a video like this, which is essentially acknowledging the fact that there's a lot of people out there that want to eat healthier, but the idea of like cutting vegetables seems daunting to them because either they were never trained properly, they find it time consuming, all those things. So what this video is designed to do is just show you how it's not that hard, and also maybe show you how to properly cut some of these vegetables that you might have been cutting, I don't want to say improperly, but cutting inefficiently your entire life. So today we're gonna cover a whole bunch of stuff. How to hold a chef's knife properly. How to practice without one if you're new to this and kind of scared that you're gonna cut yourself. And a bunch of basic cuts for a variety of different vegetables of different shapes and sizes. Basically, I'm gonna teach you how to break down your vegetables. This is by no means an advanced knife course. We're not gonna get into like the minutia of really small, fancy cuts. If you wanna do something like that, let me know in the comments down below and maybe we'll do a part 2 to this. But today is really just, let's get comfy with a knife and upgrade the skills that we've already got. And at the end of this, I'm even gonna throw in a soup recipe because, I mean, we're cutting all this stuff, we might as well eat it. And if you are interested in these pot-in knives that we're gonna be using today, I have got some good news. This company wants to give you this set. And by give you, I mean they wanna give one of you this set. Now the only challenge is you have to live in one of these countries. Canada, United Kingdom, United States, Germany, Italy, Australia, Spain, or France. If you live in one of those countries, they've promised me they will ship it to you. How do you get that, you might ask? I would love you to write me some kind of a poem or a limerick or anything fun about your love of vegetables. Leave it in the comments of our YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed because only subscribers can win. And what I'm going to do on our next live stream, which is this upcoming Monday, January the 20th, I'm going to be picking the winner of this live. So tune in for that. For everyone else, Pot-In is offering a discount for our channel, so check out the link in the description down below and also use the discount code to get a sweet little deal. But that's only going to be active until the end of January, so act fast. So this knife set is really, really awesome. It comes covered up, obviously. You got to remove these to use it. Be safe. So I even got a little knife guard on the ends of these, which can, you can keep and use and put back on after you're done using the knife. Be careful putting that on though, because that's a recipe for injury. And we don't want to do that. Sweet. So this is kind of the bread and butter of your knife kit. This is what's called a chef's knife. And this is what we're primarily going to be using today. This is a serrated knife. This is ideal for cutting bread, obviously, but I also like to use this often to cut things like tomatoes, right? This little serrated edge here helps you get through, delicate things without pushing down on them and smushing them, which is why it's good for bread. But also for softer vegetables, a serrated knife can be really, really nice. This next knife is actually the kind of knife that I use the most. I use this as my chef's knife, generally speaking. It's a Santoku knife. I don't know why, I just really like the feel of it. And we'll get into kind of knife grips in a second. And especially how I like to grip a knife, which may be not the way you want to do it, but I would suggest trying mine. This is what we would call our basic utility knife. I honestly don't use these a lot. I use this for like maybe fruit sometimes, cutting up small things. But these don't get a ton of use in our house, but we do use them here and there. Last but not least is a paring knife. Small but mighty. This is what I'll grab in a pinch if I just need to like half a lemon or a lime or cut up a banana really, really quickly. Simple, beautiful, effective. One way to know how sharp your knife is to do the paper test. So we'll just take our chef's knife here, which is what we're gonna be using today. And just, it should effortlessly cut through this. A nice clean edge. I'll show you what a dull knife looks like. That's the knives I'm cutting with currently. It will not cut through this clearly as nicely. Clearly as nicely. See, this is a knife that desperately needs to be sharpened. I'm not going to show you how to sharpen knives today, but maybe that's something I could do in a part 2 to this video if you want to see how to sharpen knives. But look at this, just like, I mean, it's kind of going through, but it's rough, right? Or if I take this one, look at that. That's a sharp knife. I don't know what that accent was, and I apologize if I offended anyone. I shouldn't point the knife when I'm apologizing. Now, before we get into the cutting, I'd like to give a quick hello to some of you who've said hello to us in the comments down below. Trish from Bristol, England in the United Kingdom. Shannon from Calgary. Leslie in her RV, which is currently parked in Florida as of the recording of this video. Libby in Minneapolis. Mark B from Duluth, Minnesota. Annette from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Virginia from Southern California. Alora from Oromocto, New Brunswick in Canada. She lives in a town that has the second largest military base in Canada. They need a discount code on some knives. Constance from Amsterdam, currently living in Belgium, the chocolate wonderland. She said that, not me, but that's what I hear. Mama Big Baba from Queens, New York. I love your name. I'm hoping that's what people call you in real life. Karen from Moffat Beach in Queensland. And Joanna and Paul from Brattleboro, Vermont. Let's get cutting. So to start off, let's talk about how to hold your knife. So a lot of people think that you just hold the knife by the handle, just like that. And you can do that for sure. I'm sure a lot of us have done that, but I find you don't have the control that I want to have when I'm using a knife. So the thing that I like to do is I actually hold it like this. This is the grip up here. So I kind of clutch it around the side and I have my thumb over here. And this gives me a lot of control, okay? So that's the first thing, is don't grip it like this. It just feels a bit flimsy. I mean, you can cut like this if you want, if you're cutting like herbs or something, but you can also do that with this. And I find what happens here is your knife just kind of becomes an extension of your arm, right? Because it's nice and locked in there and you've got a really good grip on it. So that's how I like to hold my knife, with my thumb over here. I don't know, it's just nice and firm and cozy, and I just like it. So the next thing that's really important, and you've probably seen me cutting vegetables like this on the channel anyway, is rolling technique, okay? And what that means is when you're cutting, and this is how you cut really fast when you're going along a line, you're like dice, 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 dice. What you're doing is when you're keeping the tip of your blade on the surface the entire time, right? And you're only really bringing back up the back of it, right? And what you're doing is you're going like this over and over again with a quick motion. And so when your vegetables are going underneath, you'll see this in a second when we start cutting things. You're doing a technique like this, and you're just gonna be sliding your blade ever so slightly towards your other hand, which is gonna be guiding your vegetables, right? Now, this is the next thing that's really, really important. It's gonna keep you from cutting your fingers off, right? Is doing the proper, what they call the crab claw, you know? So when you're grabbing something, I'll grab, let's use a piece of celery. So I wanna go like this, right? And you wanna keep your knuckles up against your knife, right? Actually, I don't need the celery for this. And the beauty of this is you're gonna use this as your guide, right? And because you're never bringing your knife up off the ground, the bottom of it anyway, you're only gonna get your blade so high. So the trick is, if you can keep your knuckles against it, first of all, you can't cut your fingers because they're not out like that. Like, that's how you cut your fingers when you hold them out like that. But you put them like this, the worst you're gonna do is maybe nick your fingers, your knuckles here, right? That's the worst that's gonna happen. But it won't happen if you're using proper technique and you're keeping it against here, right? It's almost like a safety guard. And that's gonna keep your speed and your pace and everything. I'm not perfect with this. When I get cutting fast, you'll see me in the videos, like I have my fingers out a bit more. I should be more conscious of this. The other thing that's really important is just having a really sharp blade. It sounds counterintuitive, but the sharper your knife is, the less likely you are to cut yourself. And the reason is because when you use a dull knife, you're more likely to not get through the vegetable and slip off, right? And that's how you cut yourself as well, even with a dull knife, right? But we'll show you how to properly hold your hands on vegetables, so that's almost impossible as well if you're using proper technique. You'll see more of this as we go through. Hopefully this is making sense to you. If not, let me know in the comments down below. Now, if you want to get some practice kind of doing that rolling knife technique without using a sharp blade, I recommend getting a bench scraper if you don't already have one. These things are great. If you make bread and whatnot, you probably have one of these things. They're nice and dull on the end. And you can do the same thing. You can grip it with your hand like this and do the rolling technique as well. And what we want to do with this is we want to use this to practice our technique of cutting things equally, right? Because you're the one that's in charge of the size of your dice or whatever kind of cut you're doing. And, you know, generally speaking, you want things to be as uniform as possible because they'll just cook at an even rate if they're like that. If you have different sizes of your vegetables cut, some might be mushy, some might be undercooked. So that's the reason for doing that. The best way to practice this is actually using flour on your cutting board. So just take a handful of whatever flour you've got, and if you do it on a cutting board, you're not wasting this, you can put it back in after. And just give yourself a liberal amount of flour here. If you don't have a bench scraper, obviously you can just do this with a knife too. So let's put this stuff that I just mentioned into practice. And what the flour is gonna do is let you see the shape of your knife cuts, okay? So I'm gonna pretend I have like a carrot here or a celery or something else. And what I wanna do is I wanna use this to use my rolling technique and go back and forth. And what you're gonna see at the end of this is your lines, okay? That's pretty good, you know? And I was going pretty slow. The beautiful thing is practice slowly, the speed will come later on, right? But this shows you how your knife cuts are gonna look like. And then, you know, the beautiful thing about the flour is you just reset it and you can practice this over and over again. I promise if you just do this for like 10, 15 minutes one day, your knife skills will improve dramatically. Okay, so that is a fun little thing you can do on your own to practice your knife skills in a safe environment. And then, you know, once you're feeling comfortable with that, then you can upgrade to doing it with your chef's knife. Let's move on to vegetables. The vegetables we're going to be cutting up today are for what I would call our what's left in the fridge soup, but with style. I'm going to show you some ways to boost up soups like that. So I've got a variety of different shapes and sizes of vegetables, and traditionally how I cut vegetables is in the reverse order of how I'm going to use them in the meal, because that way what's left on my cutting board is going in first. So I'm gonna cut the onions last. Although today I'm just gonna make an Instant Pot soup, so everything's gonna go in at once. It doesn't really matter. And if you're cutting a lot of vegetables for like a stir fry or soup or whatever, it helps to have some bowls standing by, because when you're done cutting them, you can just throw them into these bowls and then use them later on when they need to be put together. And, you know, group the vegetables that go in at the same time for cooking together, right? So the last thing that I would probably put in for a soup is potatoes, right? So let's start off with the potatoes. And, you know, in between each of these vegetables, we'll probably give our knife a little rinse off. Particularly with the potatoes, we will, because there's going to be excess starch on top of that. You know, obviously clean your vegetables before you get started. These potatoes have been scrubbed, but they've still got some eyes and stuff in them. So if you want to peel your potatoes, go right ahead. I like the nutrients that come in the skin, so I don't do that. Okay, so here's your biggest problem with the potato, right? And what I'll do is I'll cut these like I would cut them for French fries, and then I'm just gonna dice them after that, right? Now the biggest problem with a potato or any vegetable that's round is you just have a higher probability of cutting yourself because of the round shape. So basically you want to take away the round shape and give yourself a flat, safe surface. So the first thing I do is I find the middle of the vegetable, and then you take your hand like this and you put it over top So you're gripping the vegetable on both sides, right? Now you could slip one way or the other. That is a possibility. So what I like to do is actually, before I put my hand over top, is I like to just like kind of saw into it and get a little groove inside the potato like that. So now that way it's firm inside there. It's not going to go anywhere, right? Now I'll put my hand over top of it and cut through like that. Boom. Now we've got a nice flat surface, okay? And then what I'll do here is I'm just going to trim off a bit of a side here, get rid of some of that skin, and now I've got another flat surface here. It's more stable, right, than it was a second ago. And then what I want to do is just kind of make some even cuts along here. And actually, you know what? I started already, but if you can't do this by eye, one tip is this. Start by cutting in half, okay? And then cutting those halves in half. And that's the best way to kind of get it even just by eyesight. Okay, so now we've got some layers there, and we're going to dice those in a second. We're going to do the same on this side. We're just going to cut a little bit off. We'll do it on this side because it's a bit flatter already. Just enough to give it a flat edge to rest on. And now it's safe. Cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half. Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to cut these into what you'd probably consider French fries. And do the same thing. Cut it in half, and then cut those equally in half. I should be doing this. Look what I did. I did this wrong already. I should be putting it over like this. And that also helps you push them together so they're less likely to slip and slide. We can't actually do this technique here because the potatoes are just too high, right? So what we're going to do is we're still going to use this to keep our knife from cutting ourselves, but we're just going to grip it around here so they don't slide. I put a finger back here, and then I slide it out. And that's just something, I don't know if I ever learned that somewhere, I just started doing it. But it lets all this stay intact, which just makes it cleaner for moving things around. Down, slide. And by holding them together and pushing down and pushing in from the sides, you're keeping all the vegetables, all the potato together. So it's less likely to go anywhere. And now, it's a pretty efficient mound, right? So let's throw that into a bowl. Look at that, you just slide the knife underneath, you can grab them all. I got pretty much the whole half. Okay, so now we'll just repeat that with the rest of our potatoes. Now we got a carrot here. So I could peel this, obviously, but I like the skin, and especially for a soup, who cares? So let's cut the ends off, keep those and put them in your broth bag, or if you've got a dehydrator. Now, a carrot this long is a bit unmanageable for me. So what I like to do is just kind of break it down in half like this, okay? Now, I'll do the same thing I did with the potato earlier. I'm going to grab it from both sides. I'm going to create a little, I'm just going to slice into it so it's kind of embedded in there. And then we're going to cut it in half and create that flat surface, okay? Now here, if you just want to slice it like this, that's what we would call half moons, right? Because it's just half of the carrot. This is a pretty big carrot, so because of the size of it, I want to do quarter moons. If this is a smaller carrot, I would just leave it as it is. And if you've got one of those carrots that starts off really fat and then gets skinny at the end, cut it in half, and then you can have the skinnier half be your half moons, and then you can have the fatter side, cut them in half, and then you can do quarter moons with that, like we're doing right now. And now you have two options. You can either cut like this all the way along, okay? But if you want to go faster, you can do this, right? But let's go slow with the first one, and let's cut all four at once, pinching them aside. And so what you're doing is you're using this hand to decide how big your sizes are going to be, right? So we see this, and you're kind of doing it by eye in the rolling technique. Now this board is a bit wet because I just cut it down with the potatoes, so the rolling technique is not going to be as efficient if this is a dry board. So we're going to move a bit slower here. I'll try to show you a faster version in a second. That's pretty good. I got a little uneven at the end there. Celery are beautiful. They're really, really nice and simple and easy to cut. The first thing you want to do is cut off your ends. There's nothing wrong with these. You could totally use these, but because I keep a broth bag and I do compost, I'm going to use them for that because they're not going to go to waste. So you've got a couple options here. You could just cut them as is, right? You could just go down the line and kind of cut them the way the carrot is. Put them flat, right? Put them upside down like this. Because again, you want to create a flat structure for you. You're less likely to cut yourself. Now, if you want to, I'll show you with one of these. Let's pick this one because it's nice and straight. You can just slice it down the middle like this. Again, using the outside grip. If you want a really small piece of celery. These are actually pretty small celery, so I'm not going to do this with the other two. I know this is going to create an uneven cut in my soup. That's okay. This will break down and be part of the broth. Okay. Now don't do this if you're a little scared of your knife. Cut each one at a time. But once you get a little more comfortable with your knife, what you can do is you can cut, a bunch together. And the trick is to push the weight down. So you're keeping them down there. And then you're pushing in with your outside fingers, right? Like that, to keep them all together as a unit. And they're not going to move about, right? And just go at the pace and the speed that's comfortable for you. And then you just keep on moving your hand back a little bit at a time. And when you get to the end, do your best. There we go. Look at that. And that's how you cut celery. I used to struggle with how I would cut a bell pepper because I would used to go like this and I'd cut out the top, I'd go around like that and try to pull the middle out. And I would get seeds everywhere and it drove me nuts. So this is how I discovered how to cut a pepper. And I can't remember where I learned this from. Anyway, so take the top off like this and then take the bottom off. And now you got a flat surface. Look at this. So what's great about this is usually this comes right out. Look at that. And this is all usable here, right? No waste. We'll deal with this in a second. And then to further break it down, just look inside of here, and then what we're going to do is just pick a spot here, slice down, and then use your knife to separate it. And then we're just going to go around here and kind of get rid of the pith. And keep on rolling it away and just cutting it free from the inside of here. Look at that. Beautiful. So now, just break this down into like quarters. And then depending on what you want to do, if you're having like fajitas or Mexican and you just want like slices, just cut these into strips. But similar to like what we did with the potatoes, if I want to dice this, I'd cut it into strips and then do my outside grip and then just break it down a little further like that, right? And then you'd repeat that with these other ones. And when it comes to the tops and the bottoms, you kind of do a similar thing. I got a little piece here that's a little soft, so we're going to put that in the broth bag. And some of these might be already small enough. I wouldn't bother with that. Good. And then same here. Use the bottom. And then we're using the whole pepper here, right? There's like almost no waste. And the parts that we're not using, we're going to put into our broth bag or our compost machine. No waste. And that is how we cut a pepper. So now let's get into one of the more kind of quirky vegetables that we can cut. Broccoli. Okay? I don't know if I'm actually going to use this in the soup because the problem with broccoli is it can get a little bitter. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab probably my utility knife. Although you could use the paring knife for this as well. I mean, really, you could just use the chef's knife. And then what I'm going to do is work from the bottom. And I want to just kind of free the broccoli from the rest of the stems here. Kind of break it down into smaller pieces, right? I kind of think of cutting broccoli like pruning a tree. You know, it'll kind of let you know where it wants to be cut. Don't necessarily throw out the stems. These are great. You know, you can use those in a stir fry and a pasta. Don't throw them out. They're wonderful. You know, just cut off the ugly bits. So already this broccoli is taking shape, right? And now what I would do is I would continue to further, like, just rip it off too. Use your hands, right? You don't always necessarily need to use knives. You know, this is breaking down beautifully. And you can see how all these pieces are along here. I would just take the knife and go along that, and they're just gonna break off on their own. And then maybe I'll just, keep ripping them down, or I'll find kind of a natural spot and cut through there. This one's a bit bigger, so I'll probably just cut that into half. I'm not gonna break this down anymore because I don't know what I'm gonna use it for yet, but you've got a lot of options here with broccoli, and cauliflower is essentially the same. Now I'm gonna show you how to cut 2 different kinds of onions. Typically I wouldn't put both onions inside of a soup, but I've got these leeks here and they're gorgeous. Classic problem, right? Big round vegetable. Similar to the potato. Let's break it down. So these parts are kind of inedible. I don't even know if I'll put these in my broth bag. So just get to where you see the white part ending and lob this off. So the danger is, as soon as I cut into this way, the whole thing is gonna unravel, right? But we do need a flat edge. And it's also huge, that's a huge leek. So to make it manageable, I'm gonna cut it in half. Ooh, that's a firm leek, okay? Now, outside grip. Keep it together while you're doing this, otherwise it's gonna start to fall apart, right? Put it down, and then we're going to just do our kind of rolling technique, right? See how quickly this falls apart? It's just layers and layers of onion, right? What's nice about this in a soup is it's gonna fall apart anyway inside of the soup. So you could like quarter moon this type thing, but I don't find it's really all that necessary. It's all gonna break down into delicious, delicious, mushy goodness. Okay, now we're gonna break down an onion. This is your bulb. That's your friend. You wanna keep that intact. So get a good grip around here and just slice off the very top. Put that in your pile for your broth bag. And then cut down the middle. Again, go around and just gently go through, making sure the bulb is intact. Just like I showed you with the leek, it doesn't have the bulb there, is why it all fell apart. But because the bulb is there, it's holding it all in place, right? So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna just use our fingers to kind of peel off the onion skin. This makes it really, really simple. Don't worry if you take a layer off the top. Usually that layer is too tough anyway. You don't really want to eat it. That's perfect for a broth bag. Are you getting the hint yet that you should be making your own broth? Literally, to make your own broth, all you have to do is put all your veggie scraps in a bag, keep in your freezer, and when you've got a couple handfuls, throw in a pot full of water, and that's that. Keep your extra herbs as well. Boil them for like 30 minutes and then just let them sit like tea for a couple hours so they marinate and add to flavors. Then strain out the vegetables and put them into mason jars. Okay, here's our onions, right? Now, depending on what you're making, you might just want to take this and just cut this up into strips like that, right? Maybe you're making a stir fry and you want big fat onions. But if you're doing a typical meal with an onion, you're probably dicing it, right? So the best way to dice an onion is to cut it into slices, but the trick is don't go all the way back, right? Because it's all gonna fall apart. So we're gonna do it like, I don't know, 1/2 inch apart. I don't know, whatever that is. But be really careful, again, pushing on the outside edges. That's great. We'll do that on both of our onions. Okay, and then we're gonna just kind of cut in the middle. Now, I've heard people say you don't need to do this part because the onion's already sliced in the middle there. I do it anyway. Maybe I don't need to do it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Okay, again, don't go all the way back here. And now, because you've sliced down here, you've sliced in the middle, all you have to do is your traditional rolling technique. And you're gonna have these nice dice. The onions is gonna come into sections like this, right? And then you're gonna cry a little bit because onions make you think of sad things, right? Isn't that how it works? Onions make you think of sad things. And that is how you dice an onion. Let's do garlic really quickly. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not amazing at cutting garlic, and I know some people talk about, well, use some salt with it and it helps group it all together. I'm not gonna do that today. I got this big, beautiful garlic from a local farmer. We'll just do one bulb because this stuff is strong and potent as well. The trick to garlic is you want to release the inner oils. And also, it's a pain to get this stuff off. Put it down there, put your knife on top, and very carefully, do it near the back end, smash. I've never cut myself doing this. I know like it looks like the kind of thing that could cut yourself. It never happens. And the beautiful thing with this is look how quickly and easily all that skin comes off. And again with the skin, broth bag, put it in the broth bag. And then we're just gonna cut the bulb off. You don't wanna eat that part. But the rest of it is totally good to go. And so this is where you really want to hold down in here and you want to get really thin with it. Really thin slices here. And depending on what you're making, you might just want slices this big, but it's going to be pretty pungent. And for a soup, I want it to be all over the place. So what we're going to do now is, I don't know, garlic is like cutting chaos. You're just going to keep on going back and forth. You're just going to keep on kind of grouping it together and going around. I have seen people do kind of what I did with the onion with big slices of garlic. So you can do that, and that's probably a better way to do it. Honestly, we got one of those little garlic presses from IKEA, I think it was, like a decade ago, and that is generally speaking how I cut garlic. This is not something I do regularly. It's not something I enjoy doing it. I don't recommend it. I'm just doing it because it was here. And there we're at. This is another technique, putting your hand down to the bottom. And this is the kind of thing people will do with herbs as well, like really fine herbs, like if you're cutting chives or something, or small onions. Anyway, that'll work well enough. Look at this, just pick them all up. Pick it all up on your knife. Look how clean that is. So when it comes to greens, I always like to throw a little bit of kale or spinach in at the end of my my soups, just when they're already cooked, because you don't really need to you don't want to overdo it. You just want them to kind of soften. So I just like a handful or so of kale. So what I'll just do is I always wash it when I bring them home, and then I let them, dry out, put them back in the fridge. Just take like, I don't know, that to me looks like a cup. So I'll just literally cut that amount off. If you want more, go with more. Maybe a little bit more. And then I just do a really rough chop with the kale. And I'll go like a line all the way through down here. And then I'll just go the other way. And that is how I'll cut my kale for putting inside of a soup, right? And this is not a bad way to do it for salad either, or for a wrap, or something like that, right? Not a bad way to break down kale. Kale's great for soups because or curries or something like that, because it's naturally tough, so it'll break down softer. If you're gonna do this in a wrap, you might wanna massage it with some lemon juice or aquafaba first. You could use oil, obviously. We don't advertise oil here on the channel that much, but that's some ways to do it. And this is gonna be great for just on top of the soup at the end. Here's something I'm not gonna put in the soup, but I'm gonna show you a little trick if you don't know it already, is how to cut cherry tomatoes in half really, really fast. So you're not just cutting individual cherries. Get 2 plates, okay? I'm not gonna do a ton of these because I don't wanna waste them. But what you could do is you could take like a whole plate full of cherry tomatoes, and probably the more the better, it'll help stabilize the plate. And then just put the plate over top, like so. And then what we're going to do is take our knife and slide it through here. We're gonna push down the plate, and we're gonna cut through. Let's see if this actually works. Normally you'd have more in here. Is this actually working at all? Oh, I did a little bit. See? I think the problem is I didn't use a whole plate full of cherry tomatoes. But in theory, it should do that if you have a whole plate full, because they'll group together and they'll help bunch it. I was being cheap and I didn't want to waste them, so it only did like 2 of this bunch. But I promise you, if this plate was full, it would work. Before we get to making the soup, I'm actually gonna show you a little bonus tip on cutting something that I always had a hard time cutting before: grapefruit. When it comes to most fruits, you can just take all the techniques I showed you here and do the same thing. The way I slice an apple is typically the way I would slice an onion. You know, I'll dice it up. The way I would slice a banana is how I would slice up a carrot. You know, just repeat those kind of techniques. But a grapefruit is a weird beast because you can't really peel it because the skin is too thick. And you can do that thing where you cut it in half and use one of those grapefruit knives. That takes forever and I hate it and no, I'm not doing it. So this is what you do, okay? Take your serrated knife, actually, and we're gonna cut the top and the bottom off, kind of like we did with that pepper. And what you wanna do is see some of that skin inside. This is perfect. And you don't have to waste this because you can just kind of squeeze this into whatever you're eating after and get a little extra grapefruit juice. But you wanna be able to see the edge, right? Let's do the same here. Let's go a little closer. Great, beautiful, okay? Again, we have a nice flat edge now, right? Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this serrated knife and we're just gonna saw, and we're gonna do it kind of in the shape of the grapefruit, so we're gonna go around like that, right? We're not just gonna go straight down, otherwise you're gonna lose a lot of your fruit. And we're gonna go around like this. And there's still a little bit on here, but again, we'll squeeze that off, or we'll just do that. Yummy, yummy. You'll notice I swapped out my cutting boards here. Don't cut fruit on the same cutting boards you cut things like onions and garlic. Should be obvious, but here we are. So now we're just gonna go around and do the same thing. And once you have one cut down, you can almost eyeball it and use the peel here to find the shape to go around, and it'll keep you from wasting too much. That's pretty good. Right? And there's a little bit of pith on here. It's not gonna kill you, right? And we're gonna go around like this all the way, and we're just gonna slice off this. Look at that. So we got a couple options here. You could just slice this, and you've got these nice little grapefruit slices, but you can see, I don't know what they're called, these little lines inside here. I don't know if it's the pith, but it's what holds the grapefruit segments into place. Now you could use the serrated knife for this, but I think your paring knife might be a better option to just slice in here. And this is what's called segmenting, but use these little lines as guides and just get right up beside it. Slice down until you kind of feel some resistance, and then just pop it up and it'll come off like that. Do it over a bowl, so that way any juice that comes off will just fall into the bowl. And then you drink it, and you don't waste any of that good stuff. One of my favorite breakfast recipes is I'll actually like slice it like this into like discs, and I'll put that on top of my oatmeal in the Instant Pot, and I'll just cook it with the oatmeal. Now another thing that I learned to do is from Rip Esselstyn is to do what I'm doing here, and then just pour this over top of whatever cereal and fruit and nuts you're doing. Now you gotta be careful what I'm doing here because I could slip and cut myself, so be really, really careful. But what's cool, you just see these, they start folding back, like almost like pages, right? So this is how to segment a grapefruit. And it just kind of comes right off, see that? You're not gonna have any pith, it's gonna be delicious. Now the trick is, I gotta eat this before the kids come home, because if the kids see that I did all this work, cut up a grapefruit, and they didn't have to do this, they will steal it from me. Make sure you don't have any cuts on your hand, because the grapefruit will tell you real quick. And then you know what? Squeeze it. Don't waste any of that juice. We got some seeds in here we'll have to deal with, but that's okay. So what we're gonna do is obviously we're gonna throw all of those vegetables that we just cut into our Instant Pot. If you're doing this on a stovetop, I would put in your garlic and your onions and your celery first, sweat those down, and then add your carrots and your peppers, and then put the potatoes in last. Bring it up to a boil, and then cover and simmer, cook until everything else is nicely cooked, like basically until the potatoes are softened, right? But because we're using the Instant Pot, we're just throwing everything in at the same time. The only thing we're not gonna put in right away is the kale. Right? And at the end of this, I might throw a lemon in if I think it needs a little freshness, brightness, I don't know. Okay, So I've got two things going on here that I think are going to kind of make this soup what it's gonna be. And they're experiments, okay? Welcome to the channel. So I'm gonna just be lazy and just use some like no salt seasoning, Mrs. Dash. I'm gonna throw in like a tablespoon worth, like that. Maybe a little bit more, you know what? And then later on, if people want to add a little more salt and pepper to them, they can season themselves. I might throw a little nutritional yeast in here later on. Scratch that. I'm going to throw it in right now. I'm going to put in probably like, again, let's call this a tablespoon. Let's call that another tablespoon. The nice thing is that you can always add more when you're having your soup, right? So next what I'm gonna do is two things that these are the experiments for sure. Those of you who've watched our channel before, you know my daughter doesn't enjoy mushrooms. But I've actually snuck mushrooms into things a lot. I actually bought this giant jar of dehydrated mushrooms at Costco. Good deal. So what I did earlier today was I took 4 cups of boiling water and I soaked like a handful or 2 of these mushrooms in it. And I'm making like a little mushroom vegetable broth here. I haven't tried it yet. I wonder how it tastes. Oh, that's really nice. It's subtle. It's not very strong. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna strain out these mushrooms and I'm actually gonna keep the mushrooms. And my thought was I'm gonna dice these up really small into little strips. And then what I'm gonna do is air fry them. I'll squeeze out the liquid. Get as much liquid out of these as you can. And then I'm gonna cut them up small, almost into like little slivers, kind of like making like a crispy onion kind of thing. And the idea is that for those who want, they can put this on top of the soup for like a little texture element. You know, I don't know, I've never done that before, but why not, right? Maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't be, and then I'll know. And that's what cooking is. It's failing miserably and then doing it differently next time. Okay, the other thing I'm gonna do is I have all these chickpeas left over, but I don't like chickpea in a soup traditionally. I don't know why. I like it in a stew. But what I did is I took 2 cups of water and 3 cups of chickpeas and a tablespoon of miso paste, and I just blended them up. And so we're gonna pour that into here. And that looks like it's enough liquid. You want the liquid basically covering the vegetables. This is great. It's already a nice thick soup, okay? There's lots of onions in there, there's lots of garlic in there. And then we'll adjust the seasonings later because I don't know how this is gonna taste. I almost never use a soup recipe. I kind of just make them up as I go along. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. I think this one's gonna be good. I'm excited by the different flavor combinations I put in here. So we're gonna cook this for like 10 minutes on the Instant Pot setting, which will take longer than 10 minutes, obviously. It'll take probably closer to 40 minutes by the time it comes up to the temperature and cooks all the way. And then at the end of that, what we're going to do is we're gonna come back and we'll add in that kale. And then we're gonna taste and we'll adjust based on what we discover from eating it. Let's see how our soup looks. It needs lemon for sure. Seasoning, a little bit of salt I think will help brighten it up as well. So after all of that careful safety knife stuff, I cut my finger cutting the lemon. So I also recommend having some of these in your cupboard. Band-Aids specifically for knuckles and fingertips. Not a sponsor, probably should be. Yeah, because they just wrap around real nice. Didn't follow my own advice. Was working too quickly. Let me just ask you, how many other channels out there would admit that they cut their finger while giving a knife demonstration? Welcome to PB with Jay, where we are flawed if nothing else. Okay, now let's try this and see if that little bit of seasoning there and that lemon didn't make a difference. It's good. It needs some pepper too. A little bit of, I'm gonna put some more nooch. The mushroom flavor is really subtle. That might be the bitterness. So I'll probably put in like another 2 tablespoons of nooch there. I'm gonna put in the rest of that lemon. Kale. I like this. I would typically add a little bit of a tomato into here, but that's not Willie's vibe when it comes to soup. So I'm trying to make this so other people enjoy it, not just myself, which is the challenge of cooking for a family. There's our mushroom topping. I'm gonna put those off to the side, and people can add those in if they want. If you enjoyed this video, let us know down in the comments below. This is something different that we haven't necessarily done on the channel before, like me doing kind of a cooking class. So if you enjoyed this, yeah, let me know. I mean, I've done stuff like this in lives where I just give information, but I haven't done like an isolated thing like this. So if you got any ideas or things you want me to cover, let me know. I'm really open to doing stuff that is helpful for all of you. And if you want to try to win that set of potted knives, don't forget to write me a little poem or a limerick or something about cutting vegetables down in the description down below. Make sure you are subscribed for that. And if you just want to get a great discount on those knives, that's in the description down below as well. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do so for more videos like this, and stick around because YouTube wants you to watch this video next. I don't even know what it is because they picked it just for you because you're special to them. And us.